was just a mean, long day in a small western town. But eventually, I got a ride out, and this time we went as far as Cheyenne. But outside of Cheyenne, I got into the jungle. A whole bunch of hobos were on the road now. And some young ones, some old ones, and experienced ones. Anyway, I walked along, so they said, come on, join us. They were pretty friendly. And while I was there, another hobo came along. He had gotten hold of a little piglet. Ah, that was wonderful. So we roasted the piglet. They all knew exactly how to do it. It was dark, of course. And all of a sudden, we heard some yelling down the road, along the tracks. And one fellow said, the cops. And everybody took a grab for the piglet. I got hold of a foreleg and just pulled and started running. Well, I had enough meat out of that piglet to really last me. But then I managed to get on the train and keep on going. Nothing exciting. It was a long, dreary, dead ride. Eventually I did get off someplace on the road and did quite a bit of hitchhiking. But eventually I ended up in Chicago. Then some more hitchhiking, and again lost contact with a train in Toledo. There, a Swedish fellow who had jumped ship. He came on a boat into the Great Lakes, jumped ship, asked me how to get to New York, and he had a little money, so he said, come on, I buy the bus tickets from Toledo to New York. Well, I couldn't refuse. I surely didn't have the money for it. So we went on the bus to New York. The poor fellow, however, he had gotten hold of a bottle of wine and he got pretty badly drunk. Got into New York in the morning, and of course I knew my way around New York pretty well. Got on the subway, called up my sister Nellie, and before long there I was, and had a temporary clean place to stay and rest up a little bit. Well, then naturally the first thing, I contacted Fred to help me to contact the Hamburg American line for the ticket which supposedly was paid for me. All right, that worked out all right. And after a few days in New York, I went aboard the ship. I forgot the name of it. Anyway, it was the Hamburg American line. It was a very pleasant trip. After all, it was paid for, and I was a passenger, so plenty of food. Everything was nice. Quite a few Germans there going back for a visit. We got into Hamburg. Oh yes, of course I had met a girl there, and she was in Hamburg. She actually took care of my baggage while I took a quick run through the city. I don't know why she didn't want to come along. I met her later on, and at that time I had only I had to buy a ticket to Würzburg, and at that time I had only about $2.50 marks left in my pocket. So when I came into Würzburg the next morning, fortunately Mother had come to Würzburg, and there she was waiting for me at the train. Well, that was wonderful, because now of course she first of all took me to a restaurant for a real good breakfast. I sure needed that. And then of course I went on back home to American time, visited everybody, and learned a lot about the Nazi conditions at that time. That was early in 34. Well, June 34. So, nothing of great interest. I naturally visited all my friends and told them about all my adventures. and they admired it in a way. There wasn't very much we did do together because there was too much Nazi activity, and they all were tied up in some form or another. And there was a lot of whispering and talking about Röhm and Hitler and Hess and everybody. Along came the 29th of June. We were, I think that was a Sunday, we were in the resort area listening to a concert, and all of a sudden there was an interruption and an announcement. There is considerable trouble in Munich, and everybody will have to go and listen to the Führer give a talk at 7 o'clock. Oh, there was a lot of excitement. And there was talk about revolution and whatnot. And my father was afraid that I would have trouble getting out of Germany. It was really exciting. So about 7 o'clock then, radios were turned on, and there was the Führer yelling and telling about the bad Röhm and what had happened to him. By that time had been killed. And there was talk about hundreds being killed, I don't know how many. And everybody was to stay close to home and keep quiet. Well, it didn't affect me very much, but I think my parents were really scared that I wouldn't be able to leave Germany. Well, after a few days, things had settled down. I had tickets to the Passion Play in Oberammergau. I went down there, had a good time, saw the play, spent some time in Munich, bought my first good slide rule in Munich, which I still have, even though slide rules are no longer used. Went through the museums. Anyway, I had a good time on a trip down there. Then I went back to Mergentheim, loafing around some more, made another trip to Baden-Baden to visit my Nellie's mother-in-law. All I remember about that is she took me to the Kur Park, showed me as much as she could show me, and then we would hike through the hills, beautiful area, and every half hour I had to eat. Every half hour I had to eat. While we were hiking in the woods, she would pick blackberries and make me eat them. Then we stopped in one restaurant. Then we stopped in another restaurant. When I finally got back home to Mergentheim, I told my mother, please don't mention food to me. So she knew what had happened. Anyway, the old lady, she was a very nice lady, but all she knew about entertaining was to feed. Well, that was her way, and in a way I enjoyed it. As I say, she was a very pleasant lady, but I wasn't used to eating so much. After all, I never had very much money and could never afford a real big meal, so I wasn't used to eating very heavy. It was now July, and the semester usually started in August. So, early August I had to get back, and my mother again took me back to Würzburg, and there was the usual farewell scene. We just barely made the train, incidentally. My father didn't go to Würzburg. He figured that my mother go to the sentimental farewell. Anyway, I got on the train in time, went back to Hamburg, back on Hamburg American Line. My uncle, who had lived in Hamburg by that time, had moved into Mergentheim, so I didn't have any connections in Hamburg. I was all on my own, so I really could get around a little bit and visit and look around, so see a little bit of the Reeperbahn and St. Pauli at night, whatever I could afford, which wasn't much. And then back to the United States. In New York, I stopped long enough to sell a few gold coins which I had smuggled from Germany, and that was the money I needed to get back on the bus to San Francisco, because naturally I had no time now to hitchhike. And the bus fare wasn't too expensive. I think it was only about $35. Got back to Berkeley in time, registered at Cal, and started to look for a job immediately. And within a few days, I got a job working in a boarding house. And school started. Nothing to report about that. After about a week in the boarding house, I told the landlady when I saw her making bread that that's not the right way to make bread. So she looked at me. I said, well, I know how to make bread. She said, well, go ahead and make it. From then on, I was the baker in the boarding house, and I made good bread and pies. And in no time at all, we had lots and lots of students. We had at one time up to 250 students in that boarding house. That lady made a lot of money. But she paid me something like $25 cash, which was quite a bit of money then, a month, and free board and room. So I was well off, and she really started well in business. She ended up a rich woman. That was fall of 1934 when I really started school, because the previous semester was just more or less making up prerequisites, getting started, so I hadn't really done any good so far. Now I started really studying, concentrating, and getting into a routine of studying. I always had friends. It was very pleasant. I liked Berkeley, and of course it was the best life I ever had so far, because studying was not nearly as hard as working as a baker from early in the morning, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock on until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This was really leisure life as far as I'm concerned. And as far as studies were concerned, I did fairly well. Mathematics, I had to work very hard. But then there was astronomy and physics, which I really liked. So all in all, I made all right. That year, that was the fall of 34, many students had Nazi leanings and contacted me, tried to get me interested in Nazi organizations. But I had seen too much, I didn't want to be bothered. So, after a short time, they left me alone. And I think that's about all for right now. We continue later. Now, it was getting to be 1935, and getting towards May, the end of the semester. During the school year, I just worked. There wasn't anything of great interest. I had to get started. It was my freshman year. I learned to get along with the other students. Had a few little problems, like one time it was a boarding house, but still they tried to make the same ruling as in a frat house. So they tried to initiate the freshmen. Well, I didn't know anything about that habit and custom, and I surely couldn't see being initiated into something which I didn't understand. I had heard a lot about the nonsense that goes on at these initiations. So if they mentioned to me about initiation, I said, well, anybody who wants to initiate it can see me. I will take care of it. I will initiate him. Well, they tried to tell me what it is, and I told them, as far as I'm concerned, there's no initiation. Well, they then started to talk about, well, we are the majority. So I said, well, go ahead and try it. After all, I had gone in many groups and generally hold my own, so I dared them to do something. They never did. On the other hand, well, I was older than they were, and I knew I would never really get to be very close buddies with them, because I was a little different. I had a strong accent, German background. Their interests were not mine. So anyway, I did not get initiated. I got along on very good terms, never had any problems. and I sure